Hi, this is Richard Murray with another session of Parking Lot Theology. There is a passage in Acts 17 that some people use for the proposition that we can pray to any God and we can still be praying to Jesus. We can pray to false gods. We can pray to other gods from other cultures or other religions, and that we can still, in essence, be praying to Jesus. And Jesus can hear our prayers through, even though he may be being referred to as another god, whether it's Apollo, Artemis, whatever god you want to use. And that's a very difficult question, and it leads us to the issue of pluralism. You know, do all gods lead to Jesus? You know, when we're worshiping any god, does any and every god equal Jesus? And it's just a question of not knowing the name or not using the name, that God knows our hearts and that sort of thing. Well, yeah, that's an interesting question, but and I want to address it. But some people use Acts 17 for the proposition that yes, I can be praying to Allah, I can be praying I can be praying to Allah, I can be praying to Buddha, I can be praying to Krishna, I can be praying to Apollo, Artemis, in any god. And that's the same thing as praying to Jesus, if my heart's right. Well, I want to address this thing in chapter 17, because that's really not what it's saying. In that passage, Paul is going through Athens, and it says that he is vexed or provoked at all the idols to specific gods that he sees. And again, we know the Greek Pantheon, whether we're talking about Zeus, Jupiter. I know the Romans had different names for these gods as well, but whether we're talking about Athena, whatever god, Artemis, whatever god you want to say in terms of there being a temple set up to, Paul walked and saw these temples to these specific gods, and his spirit was vexed within him. He then comes to a temple of the unknown God, all right? And then he starts preaching and sharing and telling the Athenians that, hey, I'm here to tell you, I'm here to fill in the gap of what you don't know. And the point is that Paul found a place of humility in them. They knew there was a God that they knew not of, at least not in a personal, direct, intimate way. They may have had some level of knowledge and some sense of him. But there was a part of a God, there was a linkage that they didn't have it, which is why they call it the unknown God. We don't know him. Okay. And Paul said, well, here, let me tell you who the unknown God is. Paul wasn't saying it's okay for you to pray to Apollo. It's okay for you to pray to Artemis. And it's hard to imagine that someone could be praying in those temples and actually have any sort of, enlightened or illuminated vision of who God really is, which is Jesus. All right. Jesus was the revelation. And Paul goes on to tell them, God looked past all this stuff in the past. But now he's come to reveal the 0 point. This is the point of how God chose to reveal himself to man, and it was through Jesus. So Paul takes the unknown God and then fills it with the knowledge of Jesus. All right, he isn't advocating that there's no need to share Jesus. If you're praying to Apollo, just keep it up. Yeah, I'm sure hopefully you'll link up with Jesus, or you're praying to to Artemis, or the god of war. You're praying to the god of war, calling Zeus lightning bolts down. That he wasn't saying that all that are authentic interactions with Jesus. Now, is it possible that somebody, with a good heart, who has seen God's beauty in the world, has some sense of God's goodness or some sense of his presence, might be in a temple of a foreign God and be able to have some interaction on some level with Jesus? Sure, anything is possible along those lines. God looks at the heart. He doesn't look at our theology necessarily. But what we do want with our theology and with our thinking is to maximize our image of God. We need to eliminate the friction. All right. Anything that causes friction in our understanding of God's nature, God's purposes, God's goodness, God's love, God's light, anything that brings friction to us and obstructs us are things that need to be eliminated. Now, what made the Athenians so good in that temple is they were acknowledging they didn't know this God. There was a God in creation that they didn't know. And Paul was filling in the gaps there. And Paul went around preaching Jesus. If it was routine or to be expected or normative, that you don't have to share the gospel. Then it makes all the martyr's blood meaningless. You didn't need to tell people about Jesus. Just let them worship God where they're at. So we just need to be careful with this passage not to take it to places where it wasn't meant to go. It's very important that we follow the Colossians passages about the preeminence of God, preeminence of Christ in all things. The goal of every Christian should be to expand the preeminence of Christ, to just make Christ our first and best thought in every situation. It's like running on premium versus some, horrible, filthy fuel that destroys our engines, our human engines, versus running on premium gasoline. Jesus is the undiluted image of God. He is the full representation, the exact representation. And the martyrs died for that. I mean, they died for refusing to acknowledge that Caesar has that same place. And Paul even talks about that in this passage. So anyway, this passage is good. It's blessed. But I've seen some people misuse it, and I just wanted to bring back the preeminence of Christ. And y'all may get tired of that, but I am never going to stop off of it. Hopefully, never step off of it, hopefully, because I know that the older I get and the more that, the more mistakes I make and the more things I may stumble in and out of, the one thing that stays steady and growing in some level of my being is that by making Christ preeminent, everyone is upgraded. It is called the Jesus upgrade. And when you upgrade to Jesus, no matter what, no matter where you're at, it's going to improve your spirituality. It's going to turbocharge you, take you to a new level of being. Sure, there are people, of other religions that may be better, that maybe have more fruit, appear to have more fruit than Christians, but that's not really the question. The question is for each of us to be the best that we can be, for us to be the most enlightened and illuminated that we can be, that for those of us to have the image of God, the best image of God, the best and brightest image of God that we can have. So, anyway, I hope this blesses you. And listen, I know God reaches around our hearts and reaches around our mistakes and all that. And I'm not saying that he doesn't interact with these people and that they don't have some understanding, some intuitive understanding of God. What I am saying is that everyone does need to receive Jesus. Everyone needs to believe in Jesus. Everyone needs to recognize the form of God in Jesus. And if we do that, then we'll be thinking rightly. God bless y'all.